David Martinez woke up that Tuesday morning like any other day. He made his coffee, kissed his mom goodbye, and drove to the construction site downtown. The radio was playing his favorite song, and he hummed along as he parked his truck. Life was good. He had steady work, a loving family, and plans for the weekend. At the construction site, David put on his hard hat and safety vest. He had been doing this job for 15 years. He knew every rule, every safety check, and every possible danger. His crew was working on renovating an old building that would become offices for a tech company. It was a big project, and everyone was excited about the bonus they would get when it was finished. The morning started normally. David and his buddy Tony were joking around while they checked their tools. They talked about the baseball game from last night and made plans to watch the next one together. Everything felt routine and safe. Around 10 in the morning, David was working near the basement when he heard a strange sound. It was like air escaping from a tire, but louder. He looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The sound was getting louder, and something felt wrong. "Hey, does anyone else hear that?" David called out to his crew. Before anyone could answer, the world exploded. The gas line had cracked without warning. 1 second David was standing there, and the next second he was flying through the air. The explosion was so loud that it felt like the whole world was screaming. Pieces of concrete and metal flew everywhere. The ground shook like an earthquake. David hit the ground hard. His head smacked against something sharp, and everything went black. He didn't feel the heavy piece of concrete that fell on his leg. He didn't hear the screaming and shouting that followed. He didn't see the smoke and dust that filled the air. When the dust settled, the construction site looked like a war zone. Workers were scattered everywhere. Some were running around, trying to help. Others were lying still, covered in dirt and blood. The building they had been working on was partially collapsed. Someone called for help, and within minutes, sirens filled the air. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars came racing down the street. Paramedics jumped out and ran toward the injured workers. They moved quickly, checking who was hurt the worst. David was unconscious under a pile of debris. His hard hat was cracked down the middle, and blood was trickling from a cut on his forehead. His left leg was trapped under concrete, and his breathing was shallow. He looked peaceful, almost like he was just sleeping, but the paramedics knew he was in serious trouble. "We need to get him out of here now," one of the paramedics shouted. They worked carefully to move the concrete and lift David onto a stretcher. His pulse was weak, and they had to work fast to keep him stable. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, a young woman in scrubs came running over. Her name was Lisa Chen, and she was a nursing student doing her training at the hospital just a few blocks away. When she heard about the accident, she had asked if she could help. She was nervous, but determined to do whatever she could. "Can I ride with him?" Lisa asked the paramedic. The paramedic looked at her and nodded. "We can use the help. He's in bad shape." Lisa climbed into the ambulance and sat beside David. She had never seen anyone hurt this badly before. His face was covered in dust and small cuts, but somehow he looked calm. She didn't know why, but she felt like she needed to be there with him. As the ambulance raced toward the hospital, Lisa watched the monitors that showed David's heart rate and blood pressure. The numbers kept changing, sometimes good, sometimes scary. She could see that he was fighting for his life. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked the paramedic. "I don't know," the paramedic replied honestly. "He's hurt pretty bad. We just have to hope for the best." Lisa looked down at David's hand lying on the stretcher. Without thinking, she reached out and gently held it. His hand was rough from years of construction work, but it felt warm and alive. "You're going to be okay," she whispered to him. "I don't know your name, but you're going to be okay. Just keep fighting." She didn't know if he could hear her, but she kept talking. She told him about the beautiful day outside, about how the doctors at the hospital were really good, about how he had people who cared about him. She squeezed his hand gently, hoping somehow he could feel that he wasn't alone. The ambulance pulled into the hospital emergency entrance, and everything became chaos again. Doctors and nurses rushed out to meet them. They wheeled David inside quickly, asking questions about his condition and what had happened. Lisa followed them as far as she could, still holding David's hand. When they reached the emergency room doors, she had to let go. She watched as they took him inside, and she felt a strange emptiness in her chest. She didn't know this man. She didn't know his story or his family. But in those few minutes in the ambulance, something had changed. Inside her, she had held the hand of a stranger who was fighting for his life, and somehow, that moment felt like the most important thing she had ever done. As Lisa walked back to her training duties, she kept thinking about David. She wondered if he had family who were worried about him. She wondered if he would wake up. She wondered if he would ever know that a stranger had held his hand and refused to let him face his darkest moment alone. The explosion had lasted only seconds, but it had changed everything. 3 good men had lost their lives that day. David was fighting for his in a hospital bed, and Lisa, a young nursing student who had just wanted to help, had discovered something about herself that she never knew existed. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen in the blink of an eye. Sometimes we find our purpose in the most unexpected places. And sometimes the simple act of holding someone's hand can change their lives forever. David couldn't know it yet, but his real story was just beginning. And Lisa, who had always worried she wasn't brave enough to be a nurse, had just taken the first step toward becoming the person she was meant to be. The doctors worked on David for 6 hours straight. Lisa waited in the hospital corridor. Even though her shift had ended hours ago, she couldn't explain why she stayed. But something inside her refused to leave. Every time someone in scrubs walked by, she looked up hopefully, waiting for news. Finally, Dr. Rodriguez came out of the operating room, looking exhausted. He found David's mother, Maria, who had been crying and praying in the waiting room since she got the call about the accident. "Your son is alive," Dr. Rodriguez said softly, "but his injuries are very serious. The explosion caused severe trauma to his brain. We had to put him in a medically induced coma to help his brain heal. He also has broken bones and internal bleeding, but we've repaired what we can." Maria's hand shook as she held her rosary. "When will he wake up?" "I don't know," the doctor replied honestly. "It could be days, weeks, or longer. His brain needs time to heal, and we have to wait and see how he responds." Lisa listened from nearby, her heart sinking. She had hoped for better news, but at least David was alive. That was something. Over the next few days, Lisa found herself stopping by David's room whenever she could. She told herself she was just checking on him as part of her nursing training, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something about holding his hand in the ambulance had created a connection she couldn't ignore. David lay still in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped softly and showed his vital signs. His face was bruised and swollen, but he looked peaceful. The doctors had told his family that talking to him might help, even though he couldn't respond. Maria visited every single day, driving 2 hours each way from her small town. She would sit beside David's bed and tell him about what was happening at home. She talked about the neighbors who asked about him, the flowers blooming in her garden, and the meals she was cooking for when he came home. "Your friend Tony came by yesterday," Maria told David one afternoon. "He brought you these magazines about cars. He said you two were going to fix up that old truck together. He's waiting for you to wake up so you can start working on it." Lisa often found herself listening to these one-sided conversations from the doorway. She was amazed by Maria's strength and faith. Even when the doctors delivered discouraging news, Maria never stopped believing her son would recover. One evening, as Lisa was finishing her shift, she saw Maria crying quietly in the hospital chapel. Lisa had never been particularly religious, but she found herself sitting down beside the older woman. "I'm sorry," Maria said, wiping her eyes. "I try to stay strong for David, but sometimes it's so hard. You don't have to apologize." Lisa replied, "You're the strongest person I've ever met. David is lucky to have you." Maria looked at Lisa with curiosity. "You're the nurse who rode in the ambulance with him, aren't you? The one who held his hand?" Lisa nodded, feeling embarrassed. I hope that was okay. I just felt like he shouldn't be alone. More than okay, Maria said, reaching over to squeeze Lisa's hand. I believe angels come in many forms. You were David's angel that day, from that night on. Maria started inviting Lisa to sit with them during her visits. Lisa would bring books from home and read aloud to David. She read adventure stories, funny articles from magazines, and sometimes just the daily news. She figured if David could hear anything, he might like to know what was happening in the world. Today I'm reading about this man who climbed Mount Everest with one leg, Lisa said one afternoon, sitting beside David's bed. Pretty amazing, right? Shows that people can overcome anything if they're determined enough. Week after week passed with no change. David's body was healing from the physical injuries, but his brain remained in deep sleep. Some days his vital signs were stronger, and everyone got hopeful. Other days, the machines beeped more slowly, and worry filled the room. Lisa found herself talking to David about her own life during these long hours. She told him about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a nurse, and her fears about whether she was smart enough or brave enough for the job. I used to think nursing was just about knowing medical stuff, she said one evening. But being here with you and your mom, I'm learning it's about so much more. It's about not giving up on people, even when things look impossible. The other nurses started to notice Lisa's dedication. Some thought it was sweet. Others worried she was getting too attached. Her supervisor, Nurse Patricia, pulled her aside one day. Lisa, I admire your compassion, Patricia said, but you need to be careful about getting too emotionally involved with patients. It can make the job harder. I understand, Lisa replied, but I can't just walk away from him. He saved my life. That day, how did he save your life? Patricia asked, confused. Lisa thought for a moment. By showing me who I really am, by helping me understand why I wanted to be a nurse in the first place. As the weeks turned into a month, then to months, Lisa began to worry that David might never wake up. The doctors were still hopeful, but they warned that even if he did wake up, he might not be the same person. Brain injuries were unpredictable. During this time, Lisa discovered things about herself she never knew existed. She found strength she didn't know she had. She learned that caring for someone wasn't just about medical procedures, but about showing up every day, even when there was no progress to celebrate. She also learned about hope for Maria, who never missed a day visiting her son, even on her worst days, when the doctors delivered discouraging news. Maria would sit by David's bed and talk to him about the future. She planned the meals she would cook for him, the places they would visit, and the grandchildren she hoped to have someday. Hope isn't about ignoring reality, Maria told Lisa one day. It's about believing that reality can change. Lisa started to understand that this experience was changing her in ways she couldn't have imagined. She had entered David's hospital room as a student nurse who was uncertain about her abilities. But day by day, as she sat with him and his mother, she was becoming someone stronger, more compassionate, and more confident in her calling. The waiting continued, but Lisa was no longer just waiting for David to wake up. She was discovering who she was meant to become, and learning that sometimes the most important healing happens not in the patient, but in the person who refuses to give up on them every day. She held David's hand and whispered the same words. I'm here. You're not alone. Keep fighting. She didn't know if he could hear her, but she knew that saying those words was changing her own heart, one day at a time. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Lisa had just finished her shift in the emergency department, but like always, she stopped by David's room before going home. She had been reading to him from a book about adventure stories, thinking maybe exciting tales might somehow reach him in his deep sleep. Maria was at home that day, resting after the doctor had insisted she take better care of herself. For 2 months, she had barely left David's side, and the stress was wearing her down. Lisa had promised to stay with David while his mother got some much-needed rest. Okay, David, Lisa said, settling into the chair beside his bed. Today I'm reading about this man who sailed around the world alone. Pretty crazy, right? but he said the ocean taught him that he was stronger than he thought. She had been reading for about 10 minutes when she felt something strange. David's fingers, which had been still for so long, seemed to move slightly in her hand. At first, she thought she was imagining it. After 2 months of hoping, maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But then it happened again. His fingers definitely moved, just a little squeeze against her palm. Lisa's heart started beating faster. She looked at David's face, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something different. His eyelids were fluttering, like he was trying to wake up from a deep dream. "David," she whispered, leaning closer. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly. Unfocused at first, he blinked several times, looking confused and lost. Then his eyes found her face, and he stared at her with wonder. "Angel," he whispered, his voice barely audible after so long without speaking. Lisa felt tears running down her cheeks. "No, David, I'm not an angel. I'm Lisa. I'm a nurse." David tried to speak again, but his throat was dry and his voice weak. Lisa quickly got him some water and helped him take small sips. His eyes never left her face, as if he was trying to understand where he was and who she was. "Where am I?" he managed to ask. "You're in the hospital," Lisa explained gently. "You were in an accident at work. You've been sleeping for a long time, but you're safe now." David closed his eyes, trying to remember. Bits and pieces came back to him: the sound of the gas leak, the explosion, the feeling of flying through the air. But everything after that was blank, except for one thing, a gentle voice that had been with him in his dreams, calling him back. "I heard you," he said, looking at Lisa again. "In my dreams, someone was talking to me, telling me to keep fighting." Lisa squeezed his hand gently. "That was me. I've been here with you and your mom. She's going to be so happy you're awake." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Doctors and nurses came to check on David, running tests and asking questions. His memory was spotty. He remembered some things clearly but couldn't recall others. The doctors said this was normal for someone who had been through such trauma. When Maria arrived and saw her son awake, she broke down crying. She hugged him, carefully, mindful of his injuries, and thanked God over and over again. David was confused about why he had been asleep for so long, but he was amazed by how much his mother and this nurse named Lisa seemed to care about him. "Mom, who is she?" David asked quietly when Lisa stepped out to give them privacy. "She's the angel who saved your life," Maria replied. "She rode in the ambulance with you and has been here almost every day since. She read to you, talked to you, and never gave up hope that you would wake up." David was quiet for a moment, trying to process this information. A complete stranger had spent months caring for him while he was unconscious. It didn't make sense to him, but it filled him with a gratitude he had never felt before. Over the next few days, David slowly began to recover. He had to relearn simple things like sitting up without getting dizzy. His left leg was weak from the injury, and he needed help walking. But the doctors were amazed by how well his brain was functioning. They had worried he might have permanent damage, but his memory and thinking seemed mostly intact. Lisa was there through it all. She helped him with physical therapy exercises, celebrated when he managed to walk a few steps, and listened patiently when he got frustrated with his slow progress. David found himself looking forward to her visits more than anything else. "Why did you stay?" he asked her one day. "You didn't even know me." Lisa thought about her answer carefully. "I don't know," she said finally. "Something about that day. And the ambulance changed me. I felt like I was supposed to be there with you." David was struggling with difficult emotions. He felt guilty about surviving when 3 of his co-workers had died in the explosion. He had nightmares about the accident and worried about whether he would ever be able to work again. But somehow, when Lisa was there, these fears seemed more manageable. "I have bad dreams about the explosion," he told her one evening. "I keep thinking about the guys who didn't make it. Why did I survive when they didn't?" Lisa didn't have easy answers for him. "I don't know why terrible things happen," she said, "but I know that you're alive for a reason. Maybe that reason is to help other people, or to make your mom happy, or to show people that miracles can happen. As the weeks passed, David grew stronger physically, but he also began to notice something else. He looked forward to Lisa's visits, not just because she helped him, but because he enjoyed talking to her. She was funny and smart, and she made him feel like he was still the same person he had been before the accident. Lisa, meanwhile, was discovering that her feelings for David went beyond professional care. She admired his determination to recover, his kindness to the hospital staff, and his concern for his mother. She had never expected to fall for a patient, but David was different. Their connection had started in the most serious circumstances, but it was growing into something beautiful. One day, as David was practicing walking in the hospital corridor, he stopped and looked at Lisa seriously. "I want you to know something," he said. "I don't remember much about the accident, but I remember your voice. Even when I was unconscious, I heard you telling me to keep fighting. You saved my life, Lisa. Not just in the ambulance, but every day after that." Lisa felt her heart skip a beat. "You saved mine too," she replied. "You helped me understand what being a nurse really means. You taught me that caring for people isn't just about medical procedures. It's about showing up and not giving up, even when things seem hopeless." David smiled, the first real smile Lisa had seen from him since he woke up. "So what happens now?" he asked. Lisa smiled back. "Now you get better, and I learn to be the best nurse I can be. And maybe, if you want, we figure out what this thing between us means." David nodded. "I'd like that very much." As they continued walking down the hospital corridor together, both of them knew that this was just the beginning of their story. The explosion had brought them together in the worst possible way, but somehow, it had also given them the chance to find something neither of them had been looking for, a connection that went deeper than either of them had ever imagined possible. After 2 months of recovery, the day finally came for David to leave the hospital. Lisa arrived early that morning to help him pack his few belongings and say goodbye to the nurses, who had become like family to him. It was a happy day, but also strange and emotional. "I can't believe I'm actually leaving," David said, looking round the room that had been his world for so long. "This place saved my life, but I'm ready to see what's outside these walls again." Lisa smiled, but inside she felt nervous. In the hospital, she had a reason to see David every day. Now that he was going home, she wasn't sure what would happen between them. Their relationship had grown in this special place, but would it survive in the real world? "Your mom is so excited to have you home," Lisa said, helping him fold his clothes. "She's been cooking for 3 days straight, preparing all your favorite foods." David laughed. "She's probably made enough food to feed the whole neighborhood. That's how she shows love, through cooking." When it was time to leave, Lisa wheeled David to the hospital entrance in a wheelchair, as was hospital policy. Maria was waiting outside with tears of joy in her eyes. She had decorated her car with balloons and a sign that said "Welcome home." The goodbye between David and Lisa was awkward. They had shared something so intense and meaningful, but now they were stepping into unknown territory. Lisa had given David her phone number weeks ago, but he had never called. She understood. Their relationship had developed in such unusual circumstances that it was hard to know what was appropriate. "Thank you for everything," David said, reaching for her hand one last time. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Lisa replied. "Just get better and live a good life. That's all I want." As Maria drove away with David, Lisa felt an emptiness she hadn't expected. She had known this day would come, but actually watching him leave was harder than she had imagined. David moved in with his mother temporarily while he continued his recovery. Her small house was filled with the smell of homemade soup and the sound of her favorite Spanish music. It felt good to be home, but David struggled with the adjustment. The construction company had offered him a settlement and a job doing paperwork instead of physical work. It was a generous offer, but David couldn't imagine himself sitting at a desk all day. He had always been a hands-on person who loved building things and working with his crew. But the bigger problem was in his mind. David had panic attacks whenever he heard loud noises. The sound of a car backfiring or a door slamming would send him into a cold sweat. remembering the explosion. He had trouble sleeping, and when he did sleep, he had nightmares about his friends who had died. Maybe I should take that office job, he told his mother one evening. I don't think I can handle construction work anymore. Maria looked at her son with concern. Mio, you're still healing. Don't make big decisions when you're scared. Give yourself time. Meanwhile, Lisa threw herself into her work at the hospital. She had officially become a trauma nurse, and she was good at it. Her experience with David had taught her how to connect with patients and families during their worst moments, but despite her success, she found herself thinking about David constantly. Her coworkers noticed she seemed distracted. You miss him, don't you? Asked Jonat, another nurse who had watched Lisa's dedication to David over the months. Is it that obvious? Lisa replied, Honey, you fell in love with him. That's not something you can just turn off because he left the hospital. Lisa knew Jana was right, but she didn't know what to do about it. She had David's phone number, but she didn't want to intrude on his recovery. She told herself that if he wanted to talk to her, he would call. Weeks passed with no contact between them. David was struggling with depression and isolation. He barely left his mother's house except for medical appointments. The settlement money from the construction company meant he didn't have to work right away, but having nothing to do made his anxiety worse. His friend Tony visited regularly, trying to cheer him up and get him interested in their old hobbies. Come on, man. Let's work on that truck we talked about. It'll be good for you to get your hands dirty again. But David wasn't interested. He felt like a different person than he had been before the accident. Everything that used to bring him joy now felt pointless or scary. Maria watched her son struggle and decided to take action. She had stayed in touch with Lisa, calling her occasionally to give updates on David's progress. During one of these calls, Maria shared her concerns. He's not getting better emotionally. Maria told Lisa, physically, yes, but inside he's still hurt. He talks about you sometimes, but he thinks it wouldn't be right to call you. Why does he think that? Lisa asked. He says you're a professional nurse who was just doing your job. He doesn't want to bother you with his problems. Lisa felt frustrated. But that's not true. I care about him as a person, not just as a patient. I know that, and you know that, but he doesn't understand. He thinks because you're educated and have a career, you wouldn't want to be with someone like him. Lisa realized that David was dealing with more than just physical recovery. The accident had damaged his confidence and self-worth. He needed to know that someone believed in him, not just as a patient, but as a person. Would it be okay if I visit him? Lisa asked Maria. I think that would be wonderful. Maria replied, but don't tell him I called you. Let him think you came on your own. The following Sunday, Lisa drove to Maria's house. She was nervous about seeing David outside the hospital setting, but she knew she had to try. She had fallen in love with him, and she couldn't just walk away without fighting for what they had. When she knocked on the door, David answered. His face showed complete surprise, then joy, then embarrassment. Lisa, what are you doing here? I wanted to see how you were doing, she said simply. Can I come in? David looked down at his casual clothes and uncombed hair. I'm not really dressed for company, David. I've seen you in a hospital gown with bed hair for 2 months. I don't care how you're dressed. He smiled for the first time in weeks and invited her in. They talked for hours that day, and Lisa realized that David was struggling with more than just physical recovery. He was battling depression, anxiety, and a loss of identity. I don't know who I am anymore, he told her. Before the accident, I was a construction worker, a strong guy who could handle anything. Now I'm afraid of loud noises and can't even think about going back to work. Lisa took his hand. Just like she had in the hospital. You're still the same person, David. You're just healing. And healing takes time, not just for your body, but for your mind and heart too. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. Lisa started visiting David regularly, not as a nurse, but as a friend who cared about him. She helped him see that he was still valuable, still worthy of love, even if he couldn't do the same job he used to do. Slowly, David began to emerge from his depression. With Lisa's encouragement, He started taking walks around the neighborhood, then visiting friends, then thinking about what he might want to do with his life moving forward. You know what I realized? David told Lisa one evening as they sat in Maria's garden. I've always loved plants and growing things. Maybe I could start a landscaping business. Use my construction skills to build gardens instead of buildings. Lisa smiled. That sounds perfect. You could create beautiful spaces instead of just functional ones. For the first time since the accident, David felt hopeful about the future. And for the first time since he left the hospital, he felt like maybe he was worthy of the love that Lisa was offering him. 6 months had passed since the explosion that changed everything. David's landscaping business was slowly growing, and he found peace in working with soil and plants instead of concrete and steel. His hands, which had once built walls, now created gardens that brought joy to people's lives. Lisa had become his biggest supporter and his closest friend. Their relationship had grown naturally from the foundation of trust and care they had built. During his recovery, what started as a nurse caring for a patient had blossomed into something beautiful and real. I got 3 new clients this week, David told Lisa excitedly as they walked through the park together. Mrs. Rodriguez wants me to plant a vegetable garden for her grandchildren, and the new family on Oak Street wants a complete backyard makeover. Lisa beamed with pride. That's amazing. You're really building something special. David stopped walking and turned to face her. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You did the hard work, Lisa replied. I just reminded you of who you already were. Their relationship had faced some challenges. Some people didn't understand how a nurse and her former patient could fall in love. Lisa's supervisor had initially been concerned about professional boundaries. But when she saw how healthy and happy both David and Lisa were, she supported their relationship. David's construction friends had been skeptical at first, thinking Lisa was too good for him. But when they met her and saw how she looked at David with genuine love and respect, they welcomed her into their circle. She's good for you, man, Tony told David one day. You're like a completely different person since you started dating her. Happy, confident. Like the old David, but even better. The real test came when David decided he was ready to propose. He had been thinking about it for weeks, but he was nervous about whether Lisa would say yes. Their love story had started in such unusual circumstances that he sometimes wondered if it was real, or just something that had happened because of trauma. Maria, who had become like a second mother to Lisa, helped David plan the proposal. They decided to do it in the hospital garden where Lisa often went to think during her breaks. It seemed fitting that the place where they had first met would be where they took this next step. On a sunny Saturday morning, David asked Lisa to meet him at the hospital. He told her he wanted to show her something special in the garden. Lisa was curious but didn't suspect anything unusual. When they arrived at the garden, Lisa was amazed to see that David had planted new flowers and created a beautiful pathway leading to a small bench. The whole area looked like something from a fairy tale. David, this is incredible, Lisa said, admiring the work. When did you have time to do all this? I've been working on it for weeks. David replied, his voice shaking with nerves. I wanted to create something beautiful for you in the place where our story began. Lisa turned to look at him and saw that he was down on one knee, holding a simple but beautiful ring. Lisa, David said, his voice filled with emotion. You saved my life in more ways than one. You held my hand when I was broken. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And you loved me when I didn't think I was worth loving. Will you marry me? Lisa felt tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course I'll marry you. David slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood up to kiss her. Round them, the flowers he had planted seemed to celebrate their joy. They decided to have a small wedding in Maria's backyard. It felt right to celebrate there. Love in the place where David had started his recovery, and where Lisa had become part of their family. The wedding day was perfect. Lisa wore a simple white dress that made her look radiant. David wore a suit that Maria had helped him pick out, and he looked handsome and confident. The backyard was decorated with flowers from David's landscaping business, and the tables were covered with Maria's delicious homemade food. Tony was David's best man, and Jonna from the hospital was Lisa's maid of honor. The guest list included hospital staff who had cared for David, construction workers who had supported him through his recovery, and neighbors who had become friends. During the ceremony, David and Lisa wrote their own vows. David's voice was strong and clear as he spoke. Lisa, I closed my eyes in one world and opened them in another, and there you were, holding my hand and showing me the way home. You taught me that love isn't just about the good times, it's about staying with someone through the hardest moments and believing in them when they can't believe in themselves. Lisa's vows were equally heartfelt. David, you showed me what it really means to be a nurse. You taught me that healing isn't just about medical procedures. It's about showing up every day, staying present, and never giving up hope. You made me stronger, braver, and more compassionate than I ever thought I could be. After the ceremony, as they celebrated with their family and friends, Lisa and David both reflected on how far they had come. The explosion that had nearly destroyed David's life had also brought them together in the most unexpected way. Dr. Rodriguez, who had performed David's surgery, attended the wedding and spoke to the couple during the reception. You two are proof that miracles happen, he told them. Not just David's recovery, but the love that grew from such a tragic situation. You've turned something terrible into something beautiful. As the evening wound down, David and Lisa found themselves alone in the garden, looking at the stars. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if the accident hadn't happened? Lisa asked. David considered this, sometimes. But then I realized that everything that happened, even the terrible parts, led us to this moment. I wouldn't change anything because it brought us together. Lisa smiled. I used to think that meeting you was a coincidence, but now I think it was meant to be. We were meant to find each other, meant to help each other become who we were supposed to be. Years later, when David and Lisa had children of their own, they would tell them the story of how they met. Their daughter would inherit Lisa's compassion and determination. Their son would inherit David's strength and resilience. Both children would grow up understanding that love can come from the most unexpected places. The story of David and Lisa became an inspiration to others at the hospital. New nurses would hear about the student who never gave up on her patient, and patients would hear about the man who turned his trauma into a new life. Their love story reminded everyone that sometimes our greatest challenges can lead to our greatest blessings. David's landscaping business grew and prospered. He hired several employees, including two other construction workers who had been injured on the job and needed new careers. He found joy in giving others the same second chance that Lisa had given him. Lisa became one of the most respected trauma nurses at the hospital. She was known for her skill, her compassion, and her ability to give hope to patients and families during their darkest moments. She never forgot the lesson David had taught her, that healing happens not just through medical treatment, but through human connection and unwavering support. Their love story proved that sometimes the most beautiful relationships grow from the most difficult circumstances. David had lost his old life in an explosion, but he had found something far more precious, a love that was built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding that they had saved each other in ways that went far beyond the physical. As they looked toward the future, David and Lisa knew that whatever challenges life brought them, they would face them together. They had learned that love isn't just about the happy moments, it's about holding someone's hand through the darkness and believing in them when they can't believe in themselves. The explosion had lasted only seconds, but the love that grew from it would last a lifetime.